Hey guys, it's Mapple here once again, and today I wanted to talk a bit about the non-crit Ele Buzzsaw character I was playing, which was a Raider Ranger. I wanted to just make a few discussions and basically conclusions on the character, since it was my first Raider Ascendancy, so I wanted to give you an impression of how that is and how it went for me, as well as a few other just little tests I did while making the build. So first things first, the build is really quite decent and quite good from basically tier 1 to 15 on maps. It's really not that bad as a map clearing build, even though it is non-crit and pure elemental. The damage scaling is enough to more or less take care of map mods without a problem, but what really starts to become kind of an issue are tough bosses. The build just doesn't seem to have either the huge DPS or the staying power of defensivity to really take on the hardest of hard bosses and do them comfortably. Because old Buzzsaw used to have decent DPS for its time and also decent defense. These days I feel like to take on the hardest shit you either have to drop a lot of your DPS here and become more defensive, and then you probably won't have very enjoyable DPS, or go all out DPS and drop some more of your defense and probably be something like crit. So as you can see, I can still do this shit in the form of Uber Izara and Uber Lab, even with several mods up like vulnerability and whatever else, but you really have to dodge everything and be rather quick on your feet. Now I can get about another 1,000 life if I really pushed hard for it here and dropped just a little bit of DPS, and that would help a long way, certainly. But then you wouldn't have the great clear speed that you really want, and the other issue is being able to keep up frenzy charges. Because back in the day, the Elemental Buzzsaw didn't have basically any damage variables whatsoever. You always had your maximum amount of damage. You weren't based upon frenzy charges or power charges or any real flasks for DPS. You just always had your DPS. Whereas now you have to get up to 9 frenzy charges. Now, while they are awesome, they are a very large part of your DPS, meaning if you don't have all 9 up, you're going to be missing quite a good chunk of it. And in some cases that's pretty hard to do, like those Uber Izaro phases, where standing still and hitting him 9 times is pretty bullshit. A great option that was suggested to me though is having an offhand Quill Rain with a frenzy setup, just to be able to shoot 9 quick frenzies in a row with that Quill Rain on any target, since you won't really do much damage to it. And that is certainly a good option, and I think probably the best way of building up your frenzies against any sort of tough target. But it is kind of an issue in that while you're building up frenzy charges, another build may have already killed the boss. So that's the only real issue there. But most map mods like Enfeeble, Resist, Elemental Equilibrium, Temp Chains, all the way up to tier 12 so far, have not really bothered me whatsoever, and a large part of that is because I can also run Vinctars while running Ele Focus and still get shock on everything. What I mean by that is Vinctars shocks everything around you and has a single use, 4.8 seconds, with the flask nodes over here, should last something like 6 seconds. Now, it shocks you as well, but shocks everything around you, gives you a bit of lightning penetration and some life leech and mana leech, so it's still very handy to have. And because I'm using Ele Focus, it's a very large multiplier to my damage, but I cannot shock anything myself, and being non-crit, I don't have much shock chance or crit chance anyway. But the reason Vinctars is so good and easy in this build is because of the Raider portion of this build. Now, it says you have phasing while at maximum frenzy charges, and that means all you need to do is get your 9 frenzy charges going, and you'll be phased at all times. Perma-phased, it doesn't drop off. And when that happens, you are immune to elemental status ailments. So that means you are basically immune to your cold, to your ignites, chills, shocks, all of that, including ground effects like shocked ground, permanently while you have your frenzies up. And that is basically going to be 100% of the time. But on top of that, you'll also get phasing whenever you have Onslaught, and I do run a Silver Flask, it's not here anymore, but an Onslaught Flask, meaning you have on-demand phasing as well, and that's whenever you don't have max frenzies. which you should pretty much all the time anyway. So Avatar of the Veil and this entire combo here is actually very strong, and I don't even use much movement speed in my build, but if you do, then it becomes even more insane, because you get so much extra movement speed here, while phasing, which should be, like I said, pretty much all the time, you get 20%, and then these two nodes you get another 8%. So that's an extra 28% movement speed on your build from absolutely nothing, really. So that's just amazing for, let's say, Cyclone, Wanders. It actually opens up quite a few possibilities for Raider. And the other one I've gone for is, of course, Way of the Poacher and Avatar of the Slaughter. For me, this is the main reason to go Raider, or at least it was, whereas the phasing shit now actually has become very tempting for quite a lot of builds. But Avatar of the Slaughter just gives you an extra frenzy charge and an extra 3 attack damage, 3% attack speed, and 2% extra movement speed per frenzy charge. So you can imagine, once you get all of this ramped, your frenzies become absolute beasts. And you've also got extra duration on them, and you get extra evasion too. And for movement speed based builds, once again, if you combo the two of these, you get 9 frenzies. That's an extra 18% movement speed on top of the 28 you already have. That's essentially an adrenaline Quicksilver Flask out of nowhere, which is really good for any build that actually needs movement speed. Like I said, Wanders, for example, this actually becomes a very viable ascendancy because Wanders don't really have a movement skill, so running is your best bet, and all of a sudden running wouldn't feel so bad. Likewise with Cyclone, and I'll show you that right now. So I ended up testing out Cyclone and basically High-End Clone as I'd played it before on this character as a raider as well, because it's probably the obvious choice to add as an ascendancy to High-End Clone, and you really do end up moving just like a fucking Formula 1. I've never had such good movement speed on any character before, because you wear a devotees, whatever the hell 20% movement speed. You have Dark Ray Vectors, which end up giving you 45% movement speed, and with all that those Raider perks, you move so goddamn fast. It's amazing, and it's even hard to control your character. In the end, though, the character was kind of a bit squishy just based on how I was already built, and the damage was kind of not really as good as I was hoping it would be. You can still build a similar high-end clone, I think, and just add Raider in, but this is not exactly the setup you would do it in, I don't think. The point here is just that Raider's quite amazing for this Cyclone movement speed based type of shit, and it's something to consider. Now, I also did try out Lacerate in the same sort of setup, which was about as optimal as it gets. But even so, high on Lacerate, while it has pretty much as much non-crit elemental damage as a build could possibly have, it didn't quite feel that good. Now, there's no real reason for dual wielding here, because dual wielding barely does anything except for give you a bit of attack speed. It feels like you really need to scale insane levels of attack speed, and a High-On's base attack speed just isn't good enough, and also insane amounts of damage while scaling insane amounts of AoE to make a Lacerate worth a shit, because it just doesn't have enough, thanks to that 30% less attack speed on its base, to then stand up to most versions of Lacerate builds for my money. Yeah. Like, as you can see, it's not too bad. It does still kill things. Ultimately, being just Spectral Throw on this exact same setup clears like 2 times as fast, maybe even 3 times as fast. It's that much better. And the single target's even not that special. I do have quite a lot of AoE in this current form right now. I could get a bit more, but that probably won't really change much. Now, running multi-strike as well really doesn't change much, because it just locks you down for so much more that you kinda need insane attack speed to begin with to make multi-strike worth a shit either. So I was losing quite a bit of damage using multi-strike. Essentially, I think you have to go faster attacks and hope to just one-shot things. Either that or scale really crazy attack speed and pretty good damage whilst maintaining pretty good AoE. So the only potential option I see as Lacerate for any build is probably Slayer, because it scales damage really well and scales your area really well, which is exactly what Lacerate needs to stop sucking. But on the other hand, as you can see, Shocked Ground doesn't really affect me thanks to the phasing status immune shit I was talking about. So that's just a nice example right there. What I'm trying to say is if you're going to play this build, go Buzzsaw, probably stay away from Cyclone and Lacerate. I think they are your best bets or best options. And we got a boss here. Let's see if I can do any damage to him as Lacerate. I don't remember. Oh god. I mean, it's not terrible, but it's pretty terrible. In any case, I want to just basically conclude and say that non-crit Raider Ranger Ele Buzzsaw, actually pretty comfortable, pretty good build to play through maps. You're going to struggle a bit on endgame map bosses, but if you don't really do red maps and if you don't farm Uber Azara that religiously, it shouldn't matter. You'll take down Atziri and all that really comfortably. Uber Atziri I think is doable, it's just going to be fairly hard and probably not worth farming on this character. But as far as maps go, you're going to be pretty much one-shotting everything while maintaining something like 5 or 6 attacks a second, which is really quite a nice feeling for this entire build. I've already pieced apart this character just a bit to make a wander, so look forward to that. I will be showing that off in the next few days. That's all I got about this character though, guys. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys next time.